gentlemen. Hi, nice to see you all here. I've got my pink party shirt on. I had a big dinner with my group last night. Now, I know we've been having some streaming issues along the way. I woke up earlier than I had intended to, and I've been reading about it. And I know a few people have messaged me and said, try, hi, Catherine, nice to see you there. Try Streamlabs. We tried that yesterday. Someone messaged me that Aaron and Patrick's last one was clear, but they did it from home. So I think a little bit is just the reality of streaming as I'm in a city. And of course, hi Ruth, good morning. Um, so we'll see once I get home how it is. Obviously, I have a Canadian SIM card in this phone, so I wonder if it's sometimes. But am I looking? Hey, good morning, Mark. Nice to see you. Hi, Chloe. Hey, but is it nice and clear to everyone now? Funny, I was just going to leave you a message, Mark, and then I was just getting myself set up here. So I know the chat can be a little delayed, but overall it's pretty good. Now, I didn't think we'd have a particularly big crowd this morning. We had a huge crowd on yesterday. Hi, Joe. It's nice to see you. But it's, I knew I'd be up early. Now, I changed the time of this tour because my dinner last night ran all the way up past into 10 o'clock. And I do need my 8 hours sleep. It's just one of my rules. And then I'm not really starting my working day for about an hour or so. So I had a little bit of time to play with. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's lovely to have you here. I think we're officially, hey, Martine, good morning to you. Um, well, thanks, Aileen. It just seems to come. Bonjour, Michelle. It seems to come in and out. I think it's when I come into busy areas, or when you're on a call with someone and it gets a little fuzzy. I think that's part of the issue. It is one of the things that we miss about Hago because, generally speaking, the quality of the stream was so good. But that is what it is. We are on time this morning. So as I say, I've got my pink party shirt on. Everyone, I was out for dinner last night. But I'm down by the Keys, and I want to take you to see a memorial. It's a bit of a heavy morning conversation, but a memorial that I visit every time I'm in Dublin. Hi, Nat. It's very nice. I just want to give a shout out. Um, yeah, Martine, it could be that streaming as well. It also, let's just adjust this a little bit further. It could be, of course, the device that people are on as well. Like if you've got it streamed to a great big TV, it's going to process a little differently than if you're on a phone and vice versa. I tend to watch tours on my laptop. I obviously stream them through my phone, but I do have the iPhone 13. Hi, Jen. Nice to see you. Um, well, it's too bad you haven't been on, but you're here now. You'll know exactly where I am. So I'm down the Keys. I'm still on the north side of the River Liffey. If by chance you haven't met me before, my name, hey, there's Hazel. Hazel is here too. So Hazel and Mark from Amsterdam. So I was hanging out with Hazel all day yesterday, and then I will be seeing Mark at the end of May, and it is May, in fact. I put it back on my party shirt. So happy May 1st. So solidarity forever. And I did actually play the Internationale on my bus the other day. Of course, I have an American group, and they don't do May 1st. They have Labor Day, as in Canada, in September. But I do wish I were in Paris today, because this is when you get all the people marching down the roads and everything. So it's a nice time. But we're on the north side of the River Liffey. Of course, we're in Dublin's fair city, where indeed the girls are so pretty, because you all saw Hazel with me yesterday. But I just want to wander down and take you to quite a heavy memorial down here. I'm by Latouche buildings, these office buildings here. I'm by the Customs House. These buildings had a 50 million euro renovation not terribly long ago. But let's turn you around and start to have a look at this fine city out here. So the Liffey really does divide the city just north-south, and the two shall never meet, but we bridge the difference from time to time. And we're not too far from the port of Dublin. We're looking back to the west there, back up into the heart of Dublin. Um, but well, it's interesting. Um, another day of marching in Paris, no kidding. Although it does appear that the strikes in Canada are just about finished. I'm going to go and be a good citizen. I know it's a little windy, but I'm going to go and cross over at the corner up here. You know what? I said I'd be a good citizen. I've decided that I'm going to sort of cut across the road. It's a long process to wait for lights in Dublin, so it's nice to get across the road when you can. But we're in Customs House Quay down here, but it's a monument just up ahead that I want to show everyone, and I want to have it recorded. You see a sign for the Port of Dublin and the Irish ferries. There was a cruise ship in yesterday, so town was particularly busy. Hazel and I and our group went to the Guinness experience, which was good, but it was so crowded in there that it was, you just sort of felt like you were trafficked through it. Lovely old tall ship down in the distance. But remember, about 190 years ago, huge parts, or 180 years ago, huge population of Ireland had to leave this island. And now, of course, this is a very affluent country that's doing very well for itself, and that's lovely and exciting. But there's a monument here that is to emigration. Again, you might know it as the famine, and of course, the Great Hunger, or the ethnic cleansing of the 1840s. And this is just a little reminder of what it was like on this island and what it can be like for migrants around the world. Um, how dare we, hi Judy, how dare we ever attack the most vulnerable in our society? And this is a memory, and a lot of people financed elements of this. Can you imagine when you were walking off, trying to get out of this island in the desperate hope of finding food? I've mentioned on a few tours recently, during some renovations in Montreal, they have they found what they consider was a famine graveyard, or an Irish migrant graveyard, and they were able to do bone density testing on the people, and it showed just how desperately malnourished they were. So this is a really significant reminder of what it can be like when, when everything does go wrong. Generally, politics. Remember, this country still exported food during the whole time that the population fell by about 3 million people. So it is a powerful conversation to have here, and I think it's one of these sites that like I say, every time I come to Dublin, I come down and I walk down and look at this. Usually in a morning like this when it's a bit quieter. Um, it's interesting as well. There's actually a little plaque here, from the Canadian government. Jean Chrétien put this here back in 1999, but in memory of the victims of the Great Famine and for their descendants who have done so much to build Canada. And I think that's a really, really significant site and memory to have. And of course, the Irish, as much as just about any population on earth, has done so much to build other countries, because of course, the need to emigrate and the fact that there was a large population on this island once upon a time. So this memorial here is just significant and moving and touching and tragic. And it's a good reminder, of what people have come from and how this country has changed over time. Um, Indeed, John, we've actually talked about, John, on our tours, the coffin ships. We talked about that a lot up in Derry. They would only sell you a one-way passage because they wouldn't expect you to survive to come back. So here is some of the landmarks of Dublin here in the Dockland areas. So yeah, I can't just imagine. Well, the town of Cove, where my dad used to live, was one of the two main ports where people would leave from. So Cove down in the south, or Derry up in the north, and then out of Dublin here. There's people out rowing this morning. I thought we could go and wander up and have a little bit of a look at that tall ship there, and then wander around the docks a little bit. I'm not going to make this a particularly long tour, just because I have a lot to do today, but it's so nice to share it all with you. But I have a look right here. This is all in the Irish language. I guess I'll go around to the English side for everyone's sake. So, in May 1847, at the height of the Great Famine, 1,490 tenants from the Mahone estate embarked on the grueling 100-mile walk from Stokestown, Roscommon. So Roscommon, as a county, lost 60% of its population that year. Isn't that just stunning? Um, so having this national famine way is an important reminder. And for every country and every population in the world that is healing over time, we talk about this generational pain. And it is a reminder to me, of course, that in Canada, so many Indigenous people are still suffering with intergenerational suffering from as well an ethnic cleansing, and a genocide. So we won't keep it that heavy for the rest of our whole walk, but let's go for a little walk along. And in the distance, of course, you have the Port of Dublin. Now, I know I have many English friends on it, and I love you all. You will see the one skyscraper in all of Ireland there, trade union's office up there. and, and often they say, from the top of that tower on a good day, you can see Wales, and on a bad day, you can see England. I'm sorry, it's just a joke. But actually, you cannot see Wales from here. When you get up to the north of this country, then you can look up and see Scotland, of course. But You see, Ireland has played such a big role um, in human rights around the world. So the 17th of October, United Nations International Day for the Eradication of Poverty. Boy, oh boy, if we set that out as a goal, I think of what the poor Ukrainian people are going through right now, and every one of those bombs that falls on Ukraine or on Russia or wherever, every one of those things is $50,000 and up. Imagine if that was being put into housing and healthcare and food. You know, I mean, it really is a point of reflection that is well worth talking about. Um, wasn't it Einstein who said you cannot simultaneously fight for peace and prepare for war? Interesting thing. Anyway, I do think that this is epic. This is the Irish Emigration Museum. And this is an interesting conversation I've had on this particular tour. Um, I had one gentleman it was interesting because he was asking me, he's a person of color, and he was saying, I don't see a lot of minorities. And then he actually met some neat Nigerian students who were studying down in Cork. But he said, I don't see a lot of people of color, and say, well, this is a country that for 800 years people emigrated from. So this switch that happened in the late 1990s when suddenly the economy started to boom here and people started immigrating, what a massive change. And and there are, of course, like anywhere in the world, you can meet people who are intolerant, but generally speaking, the Irish have proven themselves to be very welcoming. And of course, this society, this economy needs the migrant workers. I mean, just about anyone serving you now here in Dublin, like the hotels I'm staying at, 50, 60% of the workers come from other parts in the European Union. So here's the Sean O'Casey Bridge right here. He was a playwright, humanist, and chronicler of Dublin's poor. So, and Dublin was, I mean, there were big slums here once upon a time. Goodness me, lots of growing. But look at this for a fabulous view down in the distance here. I can see some of the big ferries down there. Now, ferries go over to the UK, over to Wales from here, and up to the Isle of Man as well. Do you know, I really, really thought about going up to the Isle of Man at the end of this trip. I have never been there, and it's one place that I really feel like is missing from my travel experience. But in the end, I am going down to Brighton. I have a very, very dear friend there, and I'm going to go spend a couple of days with him. And then I will be in London, of course, for a meetup on the 4th, and I fly home the 5th. So in the end, those are my plans. You'll see this lovely old ship. Can you imagine, though, when you went into these ships, the lack of space anyone had? And of course, they would lay there in just desperate situations. But also, if you even get beyond the desperate emigration of Ireland and think of what those ships are like, even if you were wealthy, I mean, it's Christopher Columbus, for example, spent the yeah, Martina, I would love to go too. But Christopher Columbus spent the last 10 years of his life suffering from desperate chronic gout throughout his entire system because of the food. And in so many places, they had to pull in and hunt to find food and find fresh water. I was reading up again about the journeys of Captain James Cook, which some people still think of as a hero. Remember, he was killed because he was trying to kidnap people. But they were going up north, and he forces people to eat walrus meat, which apparently doesn't do very well for a person's inside. So, but this is where we open up, and quite often, if I have a free afternoon in Dublin, I'll actually drive people out to the Howth Peninsula, up around the top, a little bit north of us up here. Is the Jean Johnson. It's a lucky ship. Well, it's certainly a beautiful ship. But as we come down and wander around. Yeah, and this is a tidal river, of course. They do swim it every year, and people call it the Sniffy Liffey. They make very clear at the Guinness factory the water for Guinness does not come out of this river, but from the Wicklow Mountains, which are just down to the south. So I am crossing over from the north side of Dublin, and almost immediately now I'm over on the south side of Dublin. And now this is an interesting monument over here. Of course, Ireland was a neutral country during World War II, but many Irish worked on merchant ships, and of course the U-boats, German U-boats, would go after them in many different ways. So this is a monument to seamen of serving the Irish merchant ships from 39 to 45 who lost their lives. So down on the south side, there's a lot of protected architecture around. Now, I know it's a little windy, but hopefully you're hearing me just fine. But it is really lovely to look up across the river. I don't know when I'm getting back to Ireland, but I always seem to make it here once or twice a year. So it's always a great pleasure for me to come back to this beautiful country. And of course, I have deep roots here, and I've spent a lot of my life. I always think it's fun to be doing these virtual tours here because I started guiding here way back in 1996 when I was 4 years old. Um, Gosh, I didn't know they let kids that young work at that age anymore. Have a look at this nice statue. There's so much interesting public art around Ireland. One of the fun things when you drive around, it is really always shocking to, um, my American friends, particularly when they come here, how many roundabouts you have in this country. But they've put public art in the middle of most of the new ones throughout the country, so that adds a great deal to the experience, the artistic experience. Isn't this lovely to see? So this gentleman, and it does look like we have a really solid stream today. I do find the chat can be a little bit delayed, but that's not the end of the world. And maybe I carry my reading glasses with me to read the chat, maybe, but no one knows as the screen is facing the other way. Now, I didn't really want to walk up into the wind. If the wind becomes um, something like that, Ruth, it's so hard to know. But let's keep winding up. So we had a lovely catch up yesterday with Dave and Hazel. So, and some of our friends. There you go, John. Yes, but my group are flying home later today. So they're having a nice lazy morning. I'll probably at the end of our walk here go and have just a little bit of a final Irish breakfast. And carrying doesn't help. But the problem is, if I wear the reading glasses when I'm walking, I could walk into something. Um, so here's the parish of the city key. I had a local guide yesterday, a brilliant woman named Kay. Gosh, she did a fabulous tour with my group. It was that perfect balance of excellent information and entertaining. Lovely, lovely speaking voice. But she said, I'll summarize Dublin for you. It's churches, pubs, and Georgian buildings. That's pretty much the whole heart of the architecture around here. Dublin's interesting in the sense that aside from that one sort of very nondescript 1960s sort of building, um, there's not a huge number of distinct landmarks, but because the river itself sort of defines everything as the city spans out around in a big semicircle, um, it sort of makes sense. It's a hard city to get lost in, which is good news. Um, because you can usually find your way around fairly quickly. If you came for the walk with Dave and me yesterday, you saw a very short time. We've been on O'Connell Street, of course, the widest boulevard in Europe, and then boom, we were over by Trinity College and Molly Malone. Um, do make a point of listening to the song in the rare old times. Don't do that walk. Sorry, I'm just saying. Yes, I won't do that one. There's the customs house there. Very dominant sort of colonial building. Remember, this was the second city of the British Empire. Um, and, one of the big monuments right at the Phoenix Park. Hopefully Hazel or Dave can do a tour out the Phoenix Park. The distances are big. You almost need to you could get one of these bicycles and do one out there. But there's the great big Wellington Memorial. And he was born here in Dublin, but he never considered himself Irish whatsoever. And someone once said, but sir, you're an Irishman. He said, if I were born in a stable, would that make me a horse? And so even though there's a huge monument to him, he's not a particularly loved creature in this history. Um, Also, of course, lots going on politically in Ireland at the moment. It's been interesting being here the last couple of weeks because there's been really meaningful conversations because, of course, you had the peace treaty and the celebrations of 25 years of peace, the Good Friday Agreement up in the north, but also that Northern Parliament is still not sitting. It's still frozen in time. And they're going to be leading up to some interesting elections here. Oh, the sun is just coming out now. This is just beautiful. There's a nice framing there of the customs house. And then if we just curve and look back, there is the sun coming up. So I think Mark over there in Amsterdam has just sent the sun over to us, which is pretty neat. And then, of course, it'll eventually take hours more before the sun comes up on my sun way out there in Western Canada, who I am just dying to see, but a few days to go yet. Thanks for it's over here hanging out with us because it's always sunny in Ireland. Do you know in 14 days here we really only had rain, substantial rain once. So I will say, I will give a specific shout out to coming to Dublin or coming to Ireland this time of year, later April, early May, because all of the gorse is in bloom. So the entire country had yellow flowers and everything else was flowering. So it was just gorgeous. I mean, really spectacularly gorgeous. And because I had nice weather out on the west coast in the mountains, it was just, I mean, places like Achill Island, which famously harsh weather. Of course, we had this perfect thoughtful day with gorgeous clouds. So a real treat all around. So that's an awfully nice thing to be able to enjoy. So I really do think springtime in Ireland is a great argument for a tour here. Whether you come on your own, although driving's not extremely hard. That lovely painted building over there. Okay. Oh, by the way, I have to tell you, this is one of those famous tour guide jokes, although it did happen to me genuinely in my life. Did you hear that beeping? So one time I was in the tour coach. I was coming around by Trinity College specifically, and this lady said to me, Patrick, she had a very, very strong accent, kind of New York, New Jersey sort of thing. And I said, yes, ma'am. And she said, what's that beeping? What's that alarm going off? And I sort of said, what alarm? And then she said, like on the light standards. What's that? And I said, oh, that's so blind people know the lights have changed. and and then she asked me, do you let blind people drive in Ireland? Now, that is a tour guide joke around the world, but genuinely happened once to me. I answered no. Um, but it's one of those famous ones. But to actually be asked it was sort of a fun experience. And then she came up to me after and said, I feel silly for that. I'm like, I don't blame you. So, now, we'll head up a little bit further and just have, it's really actually, there's a lot more life out here now than I maybe thought there would be. Obviously, bank holidays, they call it here. Um, and and so things are not, the shops aren't really open yet. It's interesting because the city is so famously literary more than anything else, right? It's so deeply literary as a culture and as a city, and wonderful music scene. But that, you know, you can say that about just about every community in Ireland, of course. But I've never accused Dublin of being a particularly beautiful city. It's more that it's a city with a deep soul and a deep history. Um, it really doesn't matter where she's from. And of course, they have the Lewis. That's all these train tracks we see around now. I remember I was leading tours here when they were building their whole tram system. So this is the only major European capital where everyone lives above ground. You know, there's no metro or subway system. But they really, the flow of traffic in Dublin really does work well now. And it really didn't for a few years. So it's, I have to tip my hat both to the Dubs who put up with construction for about 15 years, but also that the long-term planning did make sense. A gorgeous public house and brewery over there on the right. Some of that architecture is really fun to see. Now, there's no bears in Ireland, so that's why they're jogging and not sprinting. So I just get past everyone here. Sorry, it's quite windy. I'll go up and turn in a minute's time, and we'll get out of the wind a little bit there. Well, the mountains, of course, down to the south, the Dublin and Wicklow Mountains do frame a lot of the views through the Georgian squares. And of course, my colleagues will give you tours there. But it is, and there's gorgeous flag of the harp. Let's see if we can, there we go. We're just gonna, now yesterday, we wandered straight over here and up towards Trinity. So I thought I'd just go up towards the Halfpenny Bridge, little Halfpenny Bridge, wander over there. But as I do cross the street here, there you're looking up to O'Connell Street, and there's the spire, the Millennium Spire out there. And as they say, the widest boulevard in Europe, Daniel O'Connell, who in 1829 led to the liberation of the overwhelming majority of the population of this country, who were suffering under very distinct penal laws. I mean, so much so, they couldn't even own a horse worth more than £5. Like they were, particularly oppressive laws, and you can track some of those in the north of Ireland right up to the 1970s, the horrible events of Bloody Sunday, of course, were people literally marching for one person, one vote. There is, of course, Guinness, and Arthur Guinness, of course, has a 9,000 year lease to the land up at the Guinness Brewery. If you see cranes way in the distance, that's up towards the Guinness Brewery up there. Now, because people were out partying hard yesterday, just a street over is where you get into the Temple Bar area. Hazel, however, yesterday took us away from there to a very nice, not busy pub that was not overpriced. The trade-off with Temple Bar is you're talking about like 10 euros for a drink. So a lot of people just don't go out because it's just too expensive for what it is. But it is, of course, the main touristy center of Dublin. Of course, the last time I was here, I did go out and find some live comedy there, which was great fun. So that's a nice thing. So the whole area just up behind, you see some colorful buildings, but I don't know. There's even a Hard Rock Cafe up there. Do you know there's still one Hard Rock Cafe in Niagara Falls? It's the only one left in Canada. But but again, that's all the noisy pub area of town. Well, there's pubs everywhere, goodness me, but particularly Temple Bar is that fun party. Sorry, the wind is just coming up again, so hopefully you're hearing me just fine. You'll see all the 18th century light standards up there as well. Of course, when electricity came into Dublin, that changed the game. People used to go out and actually light street lights. It was a very, very class divided city during the colonial period. Now, Ireland did have its own parliament in the 1700s. You had the Wolf Tone Uprising of 1798, and then eventually they created the Union. Basically, they took all of the MPs over to Westminster and closed down the Irish Parliament. It took till 1801 for that to happen. See the nice flags and all these fun pubs down in the distance there. So that's all a fun Temple Bar area. And so then it took until, of course, 1921, 22 for Ireland to be declared a free state. And then eventually in 1949, the Republic of Ireland. So definitely one of the smaller countries within the European Union, but a small country with a much bigger voice. And those are the European flags. And of course, the overwhelming majority of Irish support being members of the European Union. Isn't it nice? Yeah, the boardwalk along here on the other side is just gorgeous. That's why I thought I'd come up to the Halfpenny Bridge here, the old Halfpenny Bridge, private bridge, which was a contract for crossing the river, and then we could head over to the boardwalk. But there's the Merchant's Arch right there, and that tunnel, that passageway, leads down into Temple Bar. Now, Ireland and my group has commented just how clean the country is. We've seen quite a lot of trash around this morning out here, and that's because people were out partying last night, which does happen. It's always a shame that when people are out having festivities, they feel the need to leave trash around. But here, we go up and over. So we've been hanging out on South Side in Dublin, and now we will cross over to the North Side of Dublin. I, I would pay my halfpenny, but I tried to cut a penny in half and it didn't work. So we started down at the customs house there in the distance. Isn't that lovely? And now we'll come up and over. Sorry, there's somebody. I don't like to put my camera on people who are in precarious situations, but there we are looking back up into the inside of the country there. So from County Dublin, if we drove straight west, you'd be into County Kildare. And I know Dave did a tour the other day at the Irish National Stud, where the thoroughbreds are raised. So famous racetracks. And I am interested, something I'm noticing more, maybe it's just the area of town I'm in, but so many casinos around. Now, they're just those machines. But that's not something I sort of traditionally have associated too much with Dublin. But yes, here is the wonderful boardwalk system now that you have all along the Liffey down through here. And of course, extremely sporting country as well. So we were watching some hurling yesterday. I didn't see it end, but I'm sure Cork won. Cork was doing extremely well against Waterford. Hurling is the fastest team sport that's not on ice skates, for example. The closest parallel for those of you in North America would be lacrosse. What I need to do, ladies and gentlemen, it is getting so warm. Excuse me I'm just going to prop you here for a second because I need to take my It's before another tree. Did you, Tracy? I think you've probably seen the statue. I'm just taking my jacket off because it's actually that warm all of a sudden. I really find that I'm very affected by the humidity here. Now, of course, I live in about one of the driest places you can live, and I live at high altitude. But yeah, when the sun comes out, the temperature difference is massive, and I get hot very, very quickly. So that's sort of nice. Now, it looks like all week they're going to have warm weather around here in Dublin as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just going to pick it up to O'Connell Street, and then we'll call it a day because I have to go and get my world organized a little bit. But I do want to thank you very warmly for coming along on a morning walk with me here in Dublin. And it is interesting to see that all of a sudden we've had just excellent streaming quality. So that makes, you're welcome, Natalie. So you see, there's the jacket in hand. It's a really tough one because I take this jacket because it's more waterproof than my fleece. And you never know if you're going to get suddenly hit with a little shower. But it is so nice to share this with all of you. And I will see you tomorrow afternoon in Brighton. I'm actually going down and staying with a friend of mine who we were not roommates, but we lived in apartments, flats next to each other in London over, are you ready for this? 30 years ago, 33 years ago. We've been friends that long. And it is English. It is a lovely, lovely city. Well, it's just such an interesting city, really. But so yeah, I'm going to be down visiting my buddy, and then of course May 4th. May the 4th be with you. We will do a Hago meetup, and then I'm out to the airport early on the 5th to fly home. But if you want to see more of me hanging out in Europe, I will be on the 24th of May over in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. And then I will be down in Paris, France. Look at this lovely Abbey Court. But in the meantime, I do actually have another trip, by the way, to Winnipeg, Manitoba. So I'm going to have to 100% go in and look for polar bears with everyone again. So there's a lot to look forward to the next few weeks. If you kindly would press that like button here, and the random tandem, I think Mark is kind of thinking about a random tandem. So I think that would be great fun, or a canal boat. But you'll definitely have fun catching up over there. Yeah, there he is. So we'll see what the weather's like, see what the plans are, and then also we're just gonna have some time to catch up, and then I'll be down in Paris. And I might try and reach out to the guys in Paris, but I really don't have much time because I'm taking a private family out to the beaches in Normandy. But also, I have two first cousins on Earth, and one of them lives in Paris. And she lives there. She grew up in New Zealand, but she lives there on her Irish passport. So how's that for kind of a cool thing? So there is Daniel O'Connell right there. Lovely to see. Oh, and there goes the Lewis just zipping by. So there we are, ladies and gentlemen. Now, people really have become quite interested in our signing off processes here in YouTube when the tour ends. It ends very, very abruptly. So I always like as sort of a last moment to let you have a bit of insight. And I'm going to tell you exactly which particular coffee shops Mark and I are going to go into in Amsterdam, because we can compare the products sold there to the products that are sold in Canada. So if you want to meet up with Mark and me